Naomi's laughter filled the dusty air of the small Nigerian village, a sound as free and untamed as the wind that blew through the tall grasses surrounding the settlement. In her early 20s, she carried herself with a confidence that seemed to challenge the very soil she walked on. Her bright eyes and radiant smile drew attention wherever she went, leaving a trail of admirers in her wake, both young and old, single and married. She moved with an energy that was at once intoxicating and defiant, like she was dancing to a rhythm that only she could hear. But before we dive deeper into this tale, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Make sure to turn on notifications so you won't miss the next exciting chapter. For Naomi, life was meant to be lived without restraint. The elders would shake their heads and whisper among themselves whenever she passed by, their voices laced with disapproval. Her family, too, tried to remind her of the values that had been passed down through generations. Values of modesty, tradition, and responsibility. But Naomi waved off these concerns like smoke in the air. "Why should I live like everyone else?" she would argue with her mother, her hands on her hips and a smirk on her lips. "Life is short. I'm not here to be trapped in your rules." It wasn't long before her defiance and disregard for societal norms led her down a path filled with fleeting pleasures and short-lived romances. She became entangled with a series of men, each one promising a different kind of thrill or escape. Some were as young and carefree as she was, while others were older, married, and more complicated. But Naomi didn't care. She thrived on the excitement of it all, feeling invincible in her youth and beauty. However, beneath her bravado, there were moments of doubt. Late at night, when the village was quiet and she was alone in her small room, Naomi would stare up at the thatched roof, her mind racing. She had dreams of leaving the village, of finding wealth and luxury far beyond the reaches of her small world. Yet, she never really thought about the consequences of her actions, about what might happen if one of those fleeting encounters left her with something she couldn't just walk away from. And then it happened. The realization hit Naomi like a cold wind on a hot day, cutting through her carefree existence with a brutal force. She was pregnant. The news spread like wildfire, igniting the whispers of the villagers, fueling their judgmental stares. Her mother wept in shame. Her father turned his back, and the men she had been involved with disappeared one by one, leaving her to face the reality of her situation alone. Naomi's hands trembled as she sat on the edge of her bed, staring down at her growing belly. She wasn't prepared for this, didn't want this. The weight of the life inside her felt like a chain binding her to a future she couldn't bear. She tried to think of a way out, a solution that would allow her to keep living on her own terms. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't see a way forward. In the dead of night, driven by desperation and fear, Naomi made her decision. She wrapped the baby, a boy, born just days ago, in a thin, worn blanket. Tears streamed down her face, but she refused to let herself feel the weight of them. She moved through the village as quietly as a ghost, her footsteps almost soundless on the dirt paths. She walked for what felt like hours until she reached a remote area outside the village, a place where few ventured. There, under the dim glow of the moon, she laid the baby down on a patch of earth surrounded by tall grass. For a moment she hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest as if trying to break free. But then, with a final breath and a silent prayer for forgiveness, she turned and walked away, leaving the newborn behind. She told herself it was the only way to escape her past, to reclaim the freedom she had lost. But as she disappeared into the darkness, the first cries of the abandoned child pierced the night, echoing through the silence of the empty fields. And though she didn't turn back, those cries would haunt her more than she could ever imagine. The dawn broke gently over the village, casting soft hues of pink and gold across the fields. Chijioke and Ifeoma, a humble couple who had long prayed for a child, set out early that morning, their hearts heavy with unspoken sorrow. They had been married for nearly a decade, and despite their best efforts and many visits to healers and doctors, they remained childless. Yet their love for each other never wavered, and they continued to live with quiet hope. As they walked hand in hand toward the nearby stream, something unusual caught Ifeoma's eye, a bundle lying in the tall grass, moving slightly. She tugged at Chijioke's arm, her voice barely a whisper. "Look there. Do you see it?" Chijioke followed her gaze, his brow furrowing. "Stay back," he said cautiously, stepping forward. But as he approached, a soft, fragile cry broke the morning's calm. His breath caught in his throat. "It's a baby," he murmured, bending down to pick up the small, trembling bundle. Ifeoma rushed forward, her hands clasping over her mouth. Tears welled up in her eyes as she saw the tiny, beautiful face of a newborn boy. "God has answered us," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "We must take him home." Without a second thought, they wrapped the baby in their shawl and hurried back to the village. It didn't matter where he had come from. To them, he was a gift. They named him Kalechi, meaning thank God, and from that moment, he became the light in their lives. Despite their modest means, Chijioke and Ifeoma poured all their love and care into raising Kelechi, giving him everything they could. As Kelechi grew, the village buzzed with curiosity. Some whispered about his mysterious origins, while others saw him as a blessing brought by the divine. But for Chijioke and Ifeoma, none of that mattered. They had a son, and that was enough. Kelechi thrived in the warmth of his adoptive parents' love. He was a bright, inquisitive child, always eager to learn and explore. His laughter filled their small home with a joy that had been absent for so long. Yet the whispers of the villagers never truly faded. The abandoned child, some would mutter as he passed by. The boy with no real family. As he grew older, Kelechi began to notice these whispers and the stares that lingered a bit too long. At school, some children would mock him, taunting him about his unknown parentage. "Where's your real mother?" they would sneer, pushing him around. "Did she throw you away because she didn't want you?" Each taunt was like a thorn in his heart, but Kelechi was not one to be easily broken. His parents had always told him he was special, a gift from God, and he clung to their words like a lifeline. Instead of letting the cruel words defeat him, he focused on his studies. He read every book he could find, often staying up late into the night with a candle burning low beside him. Chijioke and Ifeoma watched their son with pride. Despite the challenges, Kelechi was blossoming into a smart and compassionate young man. "You have a bright future ahead of you, my son," Chijioke would often say, patting him on the back after another long day of studying. "Never let anyone tell you otherwise." The years passed and Kelechi's determination began to pay off. He excelled in school, his teachers recognizing his potential and pushing him to achieve even more. When he was awarded a scholarship to study medicine in Lagos, the entire village took notice. It was a moment of vindication for Kelechi, a chance to prove to everyone, and perhaps to himself, that he was more than just the abandoned child. And so, with his heart full of hope and his eyes set on the future, Kelechi left the village, unaware of the unexpected paths his journey would soon take. Arriving in Lagos was like stepping into a different world for Kelechi. The city was a sprawling maze of sounds, colors, and endless possibilities. It was overwhelming and exhilarating all at once. Here, no one knew him as the boy with no origins. He was just Kelechi, a promising medical student ready to carve out his destiny. The scholarship had granted him a new life, but it also came with immense pressure. The lectures were demanding and the competition was fierce. Yet Kelechi thrived in this environment, fueled by a drive that his peers could sense but not quite understand. He knew he carried the hopes of Chijioke and Ifeoma, and he was determined not to let them down. However, the city also brought with it a broader awareness of the inequalities and hardships that others faced. Kelechi became involved in a community outreach program through his university, volunteering at local shelters and clinics. It was there that he first glimpsed the shadow of a woman whose fate would soon intertwine with his own, Naomi. Though he did not know her name then. She was just another face in the crowd, another lost soul seeking aid at the shelter. Kelechi couldn't have known that this woman's story was already written into the very fabric of his own life. Meanwhile, Naomi's life had unraveled in ways she never could have imagined. The years had not been kind. The pursuit of wealth and pleasure had left her with little more than shattered dreams and broken bones after a terrible accident. She was left alone, abandoned by those who had once circled around her, drawn by her youthful vibrance. She shuffled into the shelter, a shell of her former self, each step labored and painful. She had nowhere else to go, no one to turn to, and in her isolation, she began to reflect on the choices that had led her here. Choices that now seemed like someone else's, like a stranger's, made in the foolishness of youth. For the first time, Naomi was truly alone with her thoughts, stripped of all the distractions she had once used to avoid facing her own reflection. Her nights were haunted by dreams of the child she had abandoned. The face she imagined grew older in each dream, mirroring the passing years. She wondered what had become of him, whether he was even still alive. And with each passing day, the weight of her regret grew heavier. But she never could have guessed that the boy she had left behind was closer than she thought, nor that fate had arranged for their paths to cross once more. One humid afternoon, Kelechi volunteered to assist at a nearby shelter. It was part of his medical training, but it was more than that to him. It was a chance to give back to the community, to help those who, like him, had faced hardship. As he moved through the crowded rooms offering medicine and checking on the residents, he felt a strange pull toward a frail woman sitting alone in the corner. Her face was worn, her eyes hollow. She was different from the others, and something about her struck a chord in him. He approached her, introducing himself softly. "My name is Kelechi. I'm here to help." The woman's gaze flickered up, and for a moment there was a spark of recognition. She didn't know him, but something about his face, his eyes. It was like looking into a mirror that showed her past. They talked for a while, and as Kelechi listened to her, fragments of her story slipped out, hints that felt oddly familiar. An abandoned child, a life filled with regret. His heart began to race as the pieces came together in his mind. Could it be? He thought, feeling his world shift beneath his feet. He pressed gently, asking questions that became more specific, more pointed. And then, like a dam breaking, she admitted it. She had abandoned a child many years ago, a boy, in a small village not far from here. Kelechi's breath caught in his throat. I think that child might be me." The air between them became thick with tension. Naomi's eyes widened, her hands trembling as the realization sank in. She saw in Kelechi's face the very same features she had once turned away from. She tried to deny it, her voice shaky, but the truth was undeniable. Kelechi stood there, grappling with a torrent of emotions, anger, confusion, disbelief. The woman who had abandoned him, the source of so much pain and doubt in his life, was now before him, broken and repentant. "Why?" he demanded, his voice breaking. "Why did you leave me?" Naomi's tears flowed freely as she confessed everything. Her fear, her foolishness, her regrets. She begged for forgiveness, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I was lost," she said, "and I have paid for it every day since." Kelechi listened, his heart a storm of conflicting emotions. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but now that it was here, nothing felt clear. Could he forgive the woman who had caused him such hurt? Could he find it in himself to let go of the anger that had shaped so much of his life? For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, slowly, Kelechi nodded. "I can't forget what you did," he said quietly. "But I can. Forgive you. Not for your sake, but for mine." Naomi sobbed with relief, and though the wound between them was deep, a small bridge had been built, fragile but real. The days that followed were filled with tentative steps toward understanding. Kelechi visited Naomi more frequently, talking with her not just about the past, but about the future. He saw that she was not beyond redemption, that there was still a chance for her to find meaning and purpose. "You can't change what happened," he told her one day, "but you can use your life to make sure no other child has to go through what I did." Inspired by his words, Naomi began to dream of a new purpose. She decided to create a foundation for abandoned children, to offer them the love and care she had once denied her own son. With Kelechi's support, she started planning, reaching out to local organizations and individuals who could help her make this vision a reality. As they worked together, a new bond began to form between them, not of mother and son, but of two people united by a shared mission. Kelechi saw in Naomi a strength he hadn't expected, and Naomi found in her son a source of hope she had never dared to imagine. The foundation opened its doors a year later, a modest building on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Naomi stood at the entrance, her heart swelling with a sense of purpose she had never known. Kelechi was beside her, his presence a constant reminder of what was possible when love and forgiveness were allowed to flourish. Children came, each one with their own story, their own pain. Naomi poured herself into her work, determined to give them the second chance she had once denied. Kelechi, now a young doctor, continued to support her efforts, offering medical care to the children and helping them find hope in their futures. Their journey wasn't easy. There were setbacks, challenges, and moments of doubt, but there was also growth, healing, and a newfound sense of peace. The past would always be a part of them, but it no longer defined them. Naomi and Kelechi stood together, watching the children play under the sun. And for the first time in a long time, they both felt truly at home. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Make sure to turn on notifications so you won't miss the next exciting chapter.